Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Can you just let me know if you can hear me? Can anyone just? It's clear. Okay. So thank you very much for attending. So there's six of you out of a potential. I believe this email went out to 30 people, but we have 7 people now, so that's fantastic. If there's anyone else that comes, they can join after. I don't want to keep everyone else waiting because you were here on time. So thank you very much. Just go on. So as of right now, we have a pretty small group, so some of this might not quite be needed. Yep. But just before we start the webinar, I just want to go over a couple of things. So if you're not familiar with the BlueJeans software, if you can just look on the right side of your screen, so you'll notice that it says leave chat participants share screen. At the bottom, you'll see it says audio on and video on or off. So could you please make sure that the audio, so look on the right side of your screen near the bottom, is on mute and your video is turned off. Especially the video, the settings when you first sign in on the software, a lot of times it's turned on. And also, so as I'm speaking and whatnot, just to improve the connection of BlueJeans, if you could close any internet pages or streaming during the webinar itself, that will help prevent delays from in my speech on your end. Okay, so for today's webinar, I'll provide an introduction, introduce myself. The Tech RRT assessment project manager, Andy Candle, she can't make it today. She's going to present one slide, but she's unable to make it today, so I will do that slide. I'll provide a brief background of the Tech RRT, some very brief guidelines for the webinar, a short overview of the Epi Info software itself, and lead into a little bit of what we're doing today for this webinar, creating a data entry template in using Epi Info 7. And then we'll actually, for the fun part, we'll actually practice making a questionnaire. So this is the document that I sent to you yesterday. And if you haven't already, if you could take a second and just bring up that document, I will go back and forth with it as well. But if you have it in front of you, that's probably beneficial as well. And then, so this should take probably about an hour and 15 minutes, and then we'll open up to any discussions or questions at the end for any overview. Just to go over what is the Tech RRT. So the Tech RRT, it stands for the Technical Rapid Response Team. So as it says here, it's a response mechanism to support the collective work for nutrition in emergencies. So it's a consortium, so it's made up of 3 different organizations. You have IMC, Action Against Hunger, and Save the Children. The funding for the project itself comes from the USA to OFTA, and it was developed in close collaboration, and still is, with the GNC as well as with UNICEF. The objectives is to improve overall emergency nutrition response by deploying technical advisors. So currently we have technical advisors in the field of assessment, which is myself, the SBC, Social Behavior Change, IYCF, Infant Youth Child Feeding, as well as CMAN, so the Community Management of Acute Malnutrition. So basically, organizations or clusters in emergency situation submit a request, and then it goes through a steering committee, and they approve deployments, and we can be deployed within 72 hours, visas permitting. And we also provide technical remote support. So basically, when the advisors, when we're not being deployed in the field, which are typically for about six weeks at a time. When we're not in the field, we're on non-deployment activities. We provide a lot of support remotely to countries, as well as follow-up for countries that we've already done deployments in. So let's just go over a couple guidelines for the webinar just to help the flow. There's only 8 of us, so this, like I said, this might not be quite as important, but just in case. So for the individuals that have already downloaded the software, you're encouraged to go along with me to create the sample questionnaire. But I do realize how this might be a little bit difficult if you're using one screen. Like for example, now it's just me, but I have a monitor as well, so I have 2 screens. I understand if you have only one screen, it's difficult because you're going to be watching me create the templates, and then you also, if you're trying to create as well, it might be a little bit difficult. But if you have 2 screens, it would be easier. So if you haven't downloaded the software, by all means, just follow along. So the webinar itself, the original was on the 14th, and we have one today, and then there's another one tomorrow. So due to the high demand, the high interest, we decided to do 2 extras. So what we're going to do out of these 3 webinars, we'll pick the best one, and then that will be uploaded onto YouTube. So that process will either take place late 2017, early 2018, and I will make sure to send a link to all the people that attended the webinars. So eventually you'll have a link, so don't worry if you missed something. So the sample questionnaire itself that we're doing, it's divided up into sections. So just to keep the flow of the webinar, I suggest that basically what we'll do, if you have some questions, if they aren't urgent, I'll stop at the end of each section, and then I'll ask if there's questions, and then if you have a question, you can go to the right side of your screen, you can turn on your audio, and then you can ask the question. Alternatively, anytime throughout the webinar, on the right-hand side as well, there's a chat. So if you can just type in, like we've already done here, most of you, if you can just type in your question, and then at the end of the section, if I don't see it right away, at the end of the section, I'll stop and answer the question. But by all means, if I forget, please come in and ask me to answer your question. So the Epi Info software itself, so this is just a very brief overview to give a bit of context. And this information here I took right from the CDC website. So the Epi Info, it's a free software, and it's available in 3 platforms. So Windows, so that's what we'll be using today. It is available for mobile data collection, and then for the web and cloud. And all that is available on the CDC website, and there's the link there. And then the link that I sent before was the specific link to download the software for Windows. So in general, the Epi Info software, this is what we're going to be doing today. It's a platform where you can create data entry forms and to create a database. And you can customize it. You can create maps and graphs, and there's a lot of different extras that you can do with the software. And it's pretty user-friendly for people that don't have a strong statistical background as well. Some things, such as what we're doing today, you don't have to have a statistical background to be able to create forms, questionnaires. So it's used in various settings, so for outbreaks, developing small and mid-sized disease surveillance systems, obviously with surveys, and in emergency situations, which the example kind of what we're using today, it's highly effective, and as well in universities around the world. So public health and epidemiology, this free software is used all around the world. So that's one of the benefits. Okay, so here's some more benefits for using the software itself, Epi Info 7 forms for data entry. So the data entry forms, which you're going to see throughout today's webinar is they look quite similar to the actual paper questionnaire with what data is being entered on. And this can make it easier for data entry personnel. The data, I mean, just self-explanatory. The data entry form is similar to the paper form. So when they're transferring information over, typing in, it looks similar. So some of the functions, such as drop down, legal values, date, etc., they make it easier to perform data entry for closed-ended questions. Meaning all you have to do is click one thing. There's less typing, basically. So this could reduce the amount of mistakes from data entry people when you're transferring the information. So especially for longer questionnaires, and this is from feedback I've received from data entry colleagues in the field, especially for longer questionnaires, using the Epi Info data entry forms, which we're creating today, it reduces the time it takes to actually enter questionnaires. For shorter questionnaires, sometimes it is actually faster to do just in, for example, if you're doing anthropometry, to either just enter the data in ENA for Smart Software, or more commonly in Excel and then transferring it over to if there's very few additional variables. But for longer questionnaires, it's definitely faster using the Epi Info software for data entry forms. So just to clarify, so this webinar itself is focusing on creating data entry forms that are used from paper questionnaires. You have a paper questionnaire, we're creating a form that looks similar, and then that information will be exported into Excel, and then you can either use the Epi Info software to do analysis, or you can use any other statistical software to upload it in Excel, which we will do today to show you how to do that process. But I also want to let you know that it can also be, these data entry forms can be used for mobile data collection as well. But today's webinar will not focus so much on. So before we get started, are there any other questions? Are there any questions before we get started? If there's any questions, please speak up. Just once again, on the right-hand side, we have the audio. Just turn that to on. So I haven't heard anyone in a while, which is perfectly fine. But can someone just confirm? Just type in that you can still hear me fine before we get started, so I can clarify. Okay. Thank you so much. I can understand how this is operating here. Basically, it's just myself and verify from time to time, make sure we're still connected. Okay, so I've sent the link, so I've downloaded the software. We're going to launch. Today we're going to create a form. We're going to click on, I'm left clicking, create forms. And we're going to do a new project. So our new project today, we're going to call it Data Entry Webinar, December 19th. And you'll notice here, when I click this, so I wrote it normally, it says invalid project name. So I did this on purpose to show you that when you're doing a new project name, the software won't let you have any spaces in between. So you either have to just put the words together, or you could put an underscore. So that's what we're going. Okay, so this is the name of our project, and for the form name, so this is basically going to be our questionnaire. So we're going to call it example questionnaire. Example questionnaire. December 14th. Oops, on the 19th. So just to clarify, and this I'll reiterate this again later. So the name, so that you have your project name. So this is going to be the name of your project. Within your project, you can have different forms and different questionnaires within your project if you'd like. And then within the forms, there can be various pages. So if your questionnaire is 3 pages, so this is the example we're going to do today with 2 pages. I'll wait to elaborate a bit more the difference between name and form name when we actually work on the questionnaire in the next section, so we can describe the differences. How these won't always be the same names. Sometimes they will. If I press OK, and sometimes it takes a second. This is why when you're using the software, it's important to close anything else that's taking up a lot of like streaming, or it's things that taking up a lot of memory or gigabytes and whatnot, because the software itself, that process, it can be delayed. So now we've opened up this new form. So it's basically in a situation now where in the setting where we can enter, we can create the form, and then later we'll practice entering data. But right now it's in the setting where we will create the information. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring over the sample questionnaire to show everyone what we're doing. Here's the sample questionnaire. So right now, at the end of each section, I will bring this back over just to see. So I'm going to create this title, example questionnaire, the webinar, and we're going to do section A. And I should mention that I'm not going to be teaching all of the variables. I'm just going to be teaching variables where it's a new function, just to save some time. But for section A, I will spend a little bit extra time. So, excuse me, I'm going to do the date. I'm going to do cluster number, the household number, the team number, as well as talk about using consent, yes or no, as well as the field alignment, the format alignment, and how to undo a function that you've just done. Okay. So for the title, so basically for any of these functions here, you can use them up here, but I find it much easier just to go on the paper and then just right click. All the functions that we're going to be doing today under new field. Basically, any of these basic questionnaires, out of these functions here, this is all you need to create your basic questionnaire, even if it's many pages. Guys, sorry, I've just noticed that someone's audio is on. Could everyone just clarify that their audio is off? So on the right side of the blue jeans, not necessarily your computer, but on the right side of the blue jeans, please select off your audio. Okay, thank you. So the first thing we're going to be using is the label, the title. This information here, it's a label, it's a title. This isn't going to be used for your analysis, and even when this information is exported into Excel to start off, before it's used for analysis in other software, or if you use Epi Info 7 for the analysis, it doesn't use this information because it's just a label. This information won't get transferred. So the label, we're going to call this the example questionnaire. Sample questionnaire. Some question. So I'm just going to answer this question now. Okay, so for the field name, if when you click down, the field name will automatically. I just clicked, I left clicked, and the information it comes down, and it's exactly the same. For now, we can just keep it the same, but I'll give you good examples where you will want to change it. So for the fonts, it's quite similar to a Word document. You have the different type of fonts. Today I'm going to keep things very basic, but I will put the titles. I'll put bold, and then you have the size. So very similar to Word. Okay, I press OK. You'll notice it appears on your screen, and if you just left click it, you can drag it wherever you want on the screen. So here's our title. Okay, so we're going to do the same next. So next we're going to be doing the section A, identifiable variables. Section A. Variables. And we'll just keep it the same for now, that's fine. Bold. So I basically did the exact same thing that I just did for the title before. So here we have our section A. So the first, basically the first variable we're going to be entering here that involves numbers which we use as part of our analysis is when we're doing date of interview, cluster number, household number, and team number. So for the date, so right now I'm right clicking, go to a new field, and you'll notice there's an option here for date. So we'll call this the question. So the question or prompt. So this is what's going to appear on the questionnaire, just for us. So we're going to call this date of interview. Now for the field name, you scroll down, it automatically comes down to be the same. Now, but this field name, when you export all this information, all these questionnaires that are filled in into an Excel file, this is what each variable is going to have its own column. So this is what's actually going to appear in the Excel document if you export it to Excel. So it's very beneficial, I should say, to put this in a very user-friendly form, but it doesn't necessarily have to be as long. So if you were to look at this and just say like date of int, int, it's good enough. Date of int. So that for the data entry person, they'll know that means date of interview. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to talk about these just a little bit. So we're going to basically you can put specifications for your variable. So for us, we're going to put a range. So let's pretend that today is day one of our data collection. So the 19th, 5 days. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 19th to the 23rd is our data collection. Now, bear in mind that there maybe something comes up and, we're delayed a day or there's 2 extra days of data collection. So I'm going to put a range, even though our theoretical survey here, it's from the 19th to the 23rd. I'm going to put a lower range for the 19th today to the 25th. Basically, what that means, if when they're conducting the data entry, we will practice doing a data entry towards the end of the webinar today. If the data entry person accidentally puts a date that is not between the 19th and the 25th, it won't allow the information to be entered. So, and I'll just review some of these. So this read only function, so that's typically it means it cannot be modified by the user, and to be honest, it's generally it's only used in more advanced users, and it's not selected that often. So for the purposes of this webinar, we don't really have to focus on this. Required. So this means that if you select this, it means this information has to be filled out. Meaning when the data entry person is doing their data entry, when they get to this particular variable, it must be filled out. It won't let you go to the next question or variable until an answer is put in here. So I will say this though, with the required fields, you have to be careful if ahead of time, if you have a question, if in your survey you have several different sections, let's say, and some of those sections are not mandatory for all households. So for example, if you were conducting a nutrition survey and a mortality survey at the same time, your mortality forms, your mortality questionnaire, that's going to be asked, that may, I mean, this could change from survey to survey, but potentially you could say that maybe the mortality survey would be asked at every single household. And then the anthropometry, so that's targeting children 6 to 59 months, that would only be asked at households that had children from 6 to 59 months. So that the households that didn't have children, they would ask the mortality questionnaire, but they would skip the anthro. So if that's the case, if that's the type of survey that you're doing, you might not want to have the required selected, because there's some households where that information will not be, it will not be asked. So it's not required. So to be honest, from my personal point of view, I mean, there's no right or wrong for this. I typically don't use this required because it helps the data entry people get in the habit of, for every questionnaire, they have to do something for every question that they receive the questionnaire. They have to enter all the data for all the questions. It's just good habits. Yes, it might take just a little bit longer, but that's just my personal preference, and obviously that's opened up for. What I encourage as survey managers is speak to your data entry people and see what they prefer. Repeat last. So this means, so for example, for date, if this is selected, then it means that this date will continue to be repeated until it's changed. So that's all. But for us today, we're keeping it very basic. We're just going to add the range function. Okay. We have the date of interview. So now we can't enter data now just because the setting that we're on now is for creating the questionnaire, not for entering the data. But when this is finished, we will practice entering data during that setting, and then you can see how. And then well, you'll notice here what I'm doing now. So if this is kind of like working in Excel. If you get right on the side, you can make this smaller, make it bigger, so you can kind of adjust the look well. So the next question we're going to do is cluster number. So for a cluster number, I'm going to do a legal values. So once again I've left clicked, rolled over, come down to legal values. Legal values. So our question is going to be cluster number. Now for the field itself, I think it would be, we don't have to put cluster number. I think if we just put cluster, that would be good enough. So basically, I'll just repeat that again. So what this means is when when you're finished entering data and you want to export to Excel for analysis, if you're doing that, or if you want to take it to Excel and then another software for analysis, each of these variables is going to be its own column. So it just, the word cluster takes up less space. It's less wide than like physical space than cluster number. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to basically create our options. We're going to create new. So let's pretend I'm just for this one time I'm going to do all the numbers. So let's say so this is example of a two-stage sampling survey. So there's clusters, and let's say there is 30 clusters. That's typically what's recommended to have a minimum of 30. What I'm doing now, I'm actually playing this in a second, two things. So I'm going to type in 30. Just bear with me. Okay, so here's 30 clusters. The two things I want to just make note of. I left this first one blank, the very top one. The reason being, which I'll show in a second, is when it shows up here, it'll be blank. If you don't leave this one blank, it'll show up as 1. Now 1 doesn't mean it's being selected. The person, the data entry person can still select a different one or whatnot, but it visually appears as a 1 in the space here. So it's just I think it might be more likely to make a data entry mistake because they might think they've already filled it in when they haven't. So that's why I keep this first one blank, and I'll reiterate that in a second. The next point I want to make is down here you'll see this button that says do not sort. So I'm not going to select this to start off, and this is going to be a mistake. But basically what this do not sort does, it doesn't sort the numbers that you have here. I'm not going to sort them. If you select it, it will not sort these numbers. They will appear as they do right now, and this is what we want. Now, if you do not select it, it means it will sort the numbers. And basically what the software does, it looks at the first digit first. So it will be anything with a 1 will show up first. So this is incorrect. So I'm going to do this wrong on purpose. So I'm going to press OK. So here you'll notice the first part. So it says, here's my cluster number. And I left that first line blank, so that's why it's blank here. You click down here, you'll notice it goes 1, 10, 11, 12, 13. So what it's doing, it's looking at the first digit first, so it's all the 1s, and there's a 2, all the 2s. So this is clearly incorrect. It's in the wrong order. So now we'll learn something else. So basically, if you've created your variable, you've noticed you've made a mistake, it's very easy to fix. So I'm on cluster number. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to select properties. This is back to what we've already written. I'm going to select here, and then I'll put do not sort. When I do that, it will appear as they do here. Okay. Here, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 30. So that's correct. And I should note, so for this cluster number, what we did here, like in the properties, if you have a variable, it works the exact same. If you have for your particular survey, if you have questions that revolve around words and they don't have to be coded into numbers, instead of putting numbers here, your drop down could be words or phrases, whatever you have in the questionnaire as options for answers. Done the exact same way. So for the next um, variable, it's another number, so it's household number. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to use the function of number. So I'll introduce these two and then just discuss that there's no right or wrong for these. So the cluster number, I'm just going to bring this over a sec just to clarify it. So I'm doing this here. So we could pretend a household number, this, for our example here, this would be number of household per cluster. It might not be the actual household number. So let's say it's 1 to 15. So for our example now, it would actually be 2 digits. So you have the option. This is up to you as survey managers. I recommend speaking with your data entry people what they prefer. Is you can either do what we just did. You could have a drop down 1 to 15, or you could just type in the number. So for me personally, I prefer when you're doing many digits or whatnot, or if there's 2 digits for this, if it's only 15, I would do a drop down. If there was many, then perhaps if it's a huge range, like if it's in the hundreds, then obviously you would have to type the number because you can't have a drop down in the hundreds. But for our example here, let's do household number. So I'm going to go new field, and I'm going to type in number. So household number, and even for now, I could just put in household data entry people. They should know it's enough. And for the pattern, so for these patterns, you can select to have no pattern. So basically, there's no safety functions for data entry. Obviously, when you put these patterns, if someone can still type the wrong number, but at least it gives you a bit of a range. So these options here, each of these pound keys or hashtags is represents 1 digit. So we have 1 digit, 2 digit, 3 digit, 4, 5, and then at the bottom here you have decimals. And I just want to make it clear that these are options that are created here, but if you have something unique, you can create your own. Like for example, I mean, it's not relevant to household number, but if you want to delete, you can specialize here. Like for here, you have 2 digits, then it's a decimal, then 3. I think like you can tailor this however you want. But for us, let's say there's 0 to 15. So 0 to 15 will be 2 digits. So what that means is, I mean, we could put a range. So a digit, the low, we could put from 1 to 15. Basically, if they put for the lower ones, you'd have to put, it'd be 0, 1, 15. So you just have to say they always have to put two digits. So now here's the household number. Okay, so for team number, so this is going to be team number. We'll do this very quickly, and this will be basically a repeat of one we've done before. So this is legal values. I'm taking time to do all these questions here because I want to show you a couple other functions before we go on to the next section. So that's why I'm repeating just a little bit for this particular section. So this will be team number. And for the field name, so once again, this is what appears in the Excel output. We'll just put team. And let's pretend for our survey that there's 5. I didn't put required. You can, like I said, it's up to you how you want to do it for your survey. 5 teams. You notice the software here, it's kind of blinking a bit. It does this sometimes, but what it's trying to do, it's trying to, it's lining itself up with the other, and you can turn off that function, which I'll review in a second. So a couple options I just wanted to show you, or just talk about. We're not actually going to do them. So there's the add, there's a checkbox function, and then there's a yes, no. So for the checkbox function, I just want to mention that for this function here, you either have basically you have to have an answer for this checkbox. So once again, it's kind of like a required one, because the options, if you have this in your questionnaire, the options are checked or unchecked. That's it's one or the other. Meaning you don't want to have this, you don't want to use this option of checkbox if it's a questionnaire, like I said before, where if there's certain sections of your questionnaire that aren't going to be asked in some households. Because if you just leave it unchecked, that's still an option. So meaning it's like a no. So even if you didn't answer the question, even if you didn't ask the question in that particular household, it will appear as such. And just to clarify, so the difference between it, so this yes/no function, this is literally, it's the same thing as you can create this yes/no function. This is just a bit faster. And when we did the legal values, if we had it typed in yes and then no, it's the exact same as this. It's a drop down for yes or no. But with the yes or no function, there's the option of blank. So you have yes, no, and blank. If it's blank, it means the question was not asked. So I personally prefer to use the yes no function as opposed to the checkbox, unless if it was a small questionnaire and you're 100% sure that the question is going to be asked in every single household, because that can lead to the data entry errors. Meaning by data entry errors, I mean it's appearing as questions that were asked that were not. Okay, I want to. Okay, so I'm just going to do a test here. So new field, just going to put test. Okay. So here I want to show the undo function. So let's say I did this test and I made a mistake. And if I want to undo it, I just go up here and I press undo. And if I want to redo it, put it back. I don't want to put it back, so I'll press undo. Now I'll talk about the field, the alignment, format, alignment. So basically what I'm going to do now, so let's say you put all these, the software itself can help you out if you have a series of questions. And like, let's say, for example, if we want these stacked, what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight this section. So I'm actually taking, I'm going to left click, I'm going to drag over everything. So you'll notice everything is highlighted now. And I'm going to go to format, alignment. So let's say I want to stack it. Software will automatically stack it. So I don't want it. So for me, if we go back and we see our questionnaire, example questionnaire. So I accidentally closed it. Reopen that. But for us, we want it to look as close as it can to the actual questionnaire. And so we have it here, we have it horizontally, so we want to go back. We don't want to keep this, we want to keep it similar. So we're going to go back and we're going to put it the way it was before. So I'll undo similar to this. Match grids format. And so you'll notice basically sometimes when I was creating these new variables, the software kind of like blinked for a couple seconds. It's because it's an automatic function that it's trying to line it up already. Now, if you want to take off that automatic function, you just go to Format, Grid Settings, and then you unclick the Snap to Grid. So basically, you put it wherever you want. Because when you're playing around with this, it kind of tries to line it up on purpose, and 99% of the time, it does a very good job. Okay. So for that section, before we go on to section B, is there any questions that anyone has for the functions that we've learned so far? No? Okay. Great. So for section B, I'm going to bring it in. So here's our sample questionnaire. So for section B, like I said before, I'm not going to repeat doing, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat doing questions that reviewed the same functions that we did previously. But for this section, I'm going to do section B. Actually, I'll do a yes, no, do consent very quickly so you can see the yes, no. And then I'm going to do the respondent's name. I'll do the respondent's the age. I won't do the respondent's age because we've already seen we've already done an example of typing the number. But I will do household head, main occupation, just because there's this additional function of others. So how would we put in that information? That's basically it's an open-ended question. Where they selected 4 here, they would put in information here. So that's what we're going to do for this section. Okay, so just very quickly, I'll do that consent, the new field. So for consent, we'll use the yes, no. So I realized for the example questionnaire, it number coded it, so it has 1 and 2, but let's just pretend for us it was the option of putting yes or no. So use the yes, no function. We put consent. So here you have the option of yes or no. So basically, it's a quick way of doing the function of a legal value. That option. It's exactly the same as creating it in a bit longer legal value. So now we'll do section B. So this is quite long. So section B, I'm going to put to the household, it's H. Let's put socioeconomic. Font, bold. Okay. So for the first question is, so B1, it is respondent's name. So obviously we can't have a drop down for that. So we're going to select text. The question will be, so it's B1 respondent's name. Oh, I'll put the question number and then I'll put name. This is what you use for open-ended questions. So here, when you enter the information, you can double click in here, and you can type the respondent's name. So that was B1. Where you said we're going to skip B2 because we've already done this. This is just typing in, having the option of the age. So I mean, you could have a drop down if it went up to 99 or whatnot, or what's typical, what's most common, you would just leave it as two digits or 3 digits if you think there'd be any people over 100, and they would just type in a number. But I want to practice B4. So this is the one now that I'm going to create. So basically, you'll notice here, so that the question is household head main occupation. In terms of data entry, so yes, you have here the business, the wage, employment, no source of income, and others. But for the purpose of data entry, we're only concerned with the 1, 2, 3, or 4. We don't need to know this information here because the questionnaire should accompany whoever's doing the data analysis. Yes, you want to have as much information as possible in or that's needed in the data set itself, but they should also have access to the questionnaire to know what these actually represent. So for us, we're only concerned about 1 to 4, but then there's this extra other. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So for the question, right-click, new field, and it's going to be E4. Household head main occupation. Field name, I'm going to put B for HH for household head, and then I'll just put occupation. So for my options, folks, I made a mistake here. So the mistake I made here was I did the option of I put just a label instead of the legal values. Repeat that. My apologies. We're going to be doing a legal values. Sorry about that. B4 field name occupation. And there was 4 options. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I should mention too, as well, this do not sort. This is only relevant if it's more than a single digit. So if it's between 1 and 0 to 9, it's going to put it in order, so you don't have to worry about this. So here you have the option. So we have the option here of the household main occupation. We have a drop down of 1 to 4. So now you have to have in your questionnaire, what happens if someone selected 4? This is here. Selected 4, you have the option of other. So now we're going to do a text field. This will be, now we're going to have a text. We're going to call this B4, question B4, and then we can call it other. So this is where the data entry person would actually just type in the information here for other. So this is how you would deal with an open-ended question. Actually, 2 for the same question. Okay, for section B, that's all I wanted to go through. Is there any questions? Okay, so for section B, there's no questions. So for section C, um, we've basically unless someone would like me to do something specific, I would like just in terms of time here, I was going to skip uh, section C because everything that we've done already. I mean, in a past webinar, I showed MUAC, but MUAC, um, it's just basically it's just putting in numbers. It has to be three digits, and we did that example already in section one. I did it for the household number. So once again, so we're at the point now where we've in this section A, a lot of these functions that I've taught already, it's just repeating them with different questions. Pretty much the same. So what I would like to do now, so for section D, I just want to show a couple different examples. So obviously I'm not going to do all of these, but just for the first two. You'll notice in section D, that this first part, so it says, I would like to ask you about all different, so this is, for example, food consumption. I'd like to ask you about all the different foods that your household members have eaten in the last 7 days. So it's your food consumption, 7-day food consumption score. So you have the various codes here. So the primary food sources, they have codes from 1 to 7. So here's your food items. Here's your food groups for the particular questionnaire. So it's 1 to 11. So the number of days the food group was eaten in the last week. So obviously the answer, the range could be from 0 to 7. And here is the main food source. So if for any number here that is not a 0, you have to have the source of it. So the range here is from 1 to 7. That's your option. So we're going to for this section here in the data entry form, we don't have to enter this information because it's not needed for data entry. So we can actually just skip this, and we can put this. We just start here with this information. So I'm going to call this section D. Go back to the form. Actually, before I do that, my apologies. This new section, before I go to that, I want to teach you how to do it on a second page. So even though we skipped this section C, we're going to section D. Even though there's room here, let's just pretend there's not enough room, and we're going to do to a different page. So to create a second page, we want to go to Insert from the top left, and you have Page, and we want to add a page. So you're on, and we'll just leave it called page 2. So it's page 2. You'll notice here you have page 1 and page 2. You can go back to page 1 and page 2. If you had multiple pages, so let's say you had 4 pages and you want to put a 5th page, but you want it to be after page 2, then you would put insert. It doesn't automatically go to the end. You'd insert the page. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the end. So for section D, it's called food consumption. D. Font, bold. Okay, so once again, what I'm trying to do, so I'm going to skip this first section here. I'm just going to focus on here. What I'm going to try to do is to make this look as similar as possible. So I'm going to have columns. I'm going to have food item, the number of days, and the food source. Okay. So I'm going to show two different ways to do this. The first way of basically I'm basically just going to title the columns first. So we'll have the title. The first one is going to be food item. And then I'm going to have, so the question is number of days food group was eaten last week. So the purpose of just the data entry forms, the data entry people know what we're talking about. I'm just going to put number of days. Number of days. And for the next column, so this is the one here I'm creating here. So it says main food source. Where do you get it from? So it's from these codes here, 1 to 7. I'm just going to call it food source. Okay. So for the first item, excuse me, the first food group is cereals. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the same label. I'm going to call it, this is number 1, cereals. So I'm just doing a label for this. Here's the label. Now this is where we'll actually need the information. So for the number of days, so the option can be between 0 and 7. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, there's a couple different options, but I'm going to show both ways. So I'm going to do a drop down between 0 and 7. So I'm going to do legal values. Now, for the question, there's no need for us to put a question here because we already have cereals written as a label. So we can leave this top part blank. I'll explain why in a second. So for the field name, this is what's going to appear in Excel. So it's important that that we have a proper field name so that the people that do the analysis will know what we're talking about. So for here, we can put cereals. Cereals days. There you go. Took off the 1. For some reason it didn't like it when I put the 1. So for cereals days, and then for the options, it has to be number of days in 0 and 7. I'm going to do the same with food source. The food source once again, so we can skip question or prompt. It's going to be cereals. We'll type cereals, food source. Now the options for the food source was just 1 to 7. Basically, the number of days, anything greater than 0, you have to have, this one will have to be filled out. Okay. This is one way to do this. But now I'll show a second way. So the reason why I did this separate, I created this as a label as opposed to doing a legal value right away, is because if I did that for each of these food items, you would have you'd have it would appear like it would say numbered days, and then underneath it would say serial drop down, and then it would say serial again drop down. So it's not wrong, but just visually the way that I just did it, it looks more similar to the actual questionnaire. But if you wanted to do a legal value and fill in, if you wanted to do a legal value and then fill in the question or prompt so it appears for each one, so it would be like cereal number days, and then go down for white tubers number of days, vegetables number of days. That's fine, but it just takes up more room and it doesn't look as similar to the actual questionnaire. But I will say, so for the second one was white tubers. So I'll put a label again. So for two, this is the second food item. Was white tubers, roots. Another option that you could do is you could use the number function that we did before. So remember the numbers are between you can leave this blank, the number function for the number of days. The field name would be white tubers and days. Pattern, it would be a single digit, and then for the range, so the only options here we had between 0 and 7. Yeah. So this basically you could what I recommend as a survey manager, it's your preference, but for personally I would kind of evaluate my data entry people and see how they've been trained before, what have they done in the past, and what do they prefer. Get feedback from them, and then obviously create the questionnaire in a way that it's most user friendly to them. It's exactly the same function here. You either have a drop down or you enter the number. Okay. And so for the last part, what I wanted to do is, I mean, we've kind of gone over this before, but let's say I don't have an exact example, but let's say that you had an open-ended question. So any sort of open-ended question with like even long sentence answers, we'll just put, you want to use a text format for that. So the question could be example of open-ended question. Open. So this could be for any type of survey. You could just come up with an example. So obviously here you'd enter the information. So there's just a couple other points that I want to discuss before we go into practice entering data and importing into Excel. Is there any other questions? Is there any questions before I move on? Okay, here's a question from Karen. It says, how do you create a number that will have decimals in it? Okay, good question. So let me just review that. We go to new field and we go to numbers. So what would be an example that would have a decimal could be if you were doing in the anthropometry. So I'll bring up my questionnaire here. Sample questionnaire. Let's do the example of weight. Okay, we're going to do the example of weight. So actually, I'll put it in the correct place. So just give me a second. I'll answer your question in just 1 second. I'm going to go back to the first page now, so I just want to show how to do that. So basically, we're on page 2. Let's go back to page 1. We're on page 1. We'll pretend, just for the sake of speeding everything up here, that I've already written in section C anthropometry, and we're going to do the example now of weight. So we're going to, the new field, it's going to be a number, and it's going to be weight, kg, weight. Now this is the answer to your question here. So if there's decimals, you want to click on the pattern. So we know for weight, I'll just go back and show you here. So it's to 1 decimal place when you do weight in kg, especially like when you're using the sacred scales. And so for children between 6 and 59 months, you're not going to have more than two decimal places on the positive side as well. So 0, 0, like you're not going to have more than 99 kg. So what we could do, each of these hashtags represents a digit. So here you'll have, so these bottom two, it's kind of hard to see, but there's actually a decimal in there. So you can, they provide you with these options, but you can change them however you want. So for us, if we want weight, we're going to have mandatory to have 2 digits before the decimal. There's actually a decimal here. And then it goes to 1 decimal place after it. So we'll take that out. So now basically, if there's a child that's less than 10 kilograms, the data entry people will be instructed, they must put like 0, 0, 8, 0, 9, because if they just put 9.2 or whatnot, it won't let them enter that number because it has to have 2 digits before the decimal place and then only 1 number after the decimal. So, and then so you could put a range. So you'd have to look on the WHO charts, or for the Info Smart software, they have the built-in ranges for children. You could add that as well. But for now, basically that I think that should answer your question. So the next thing before we get into practice, just for very briefly practice a questionnaire, entering information, I just wanted to show everyone how to do the tab order. And what I mean by tab order is when you enter the order that these questions will appear when your data entry people are entering the data. So I'll just show it. So anywhere on the page, you can right click, and then you go to tabs, and then show tab order. So what this means is, so you'll notice these ones are kind of in red, and that just means that's anything that's a label. Okay, so it still has an order, but it's just a label, and it's not going to be appearing on the Excel when the information is exported to Excel. So basically, you can change these numbers. So let's say for the date of the interview, we want this to be our first question. So what I mean by that is basically when you're entering the data, the data entry person will do date of interview, and then when they click enter or they click tab, the next one it goes to will be cluster number. So that's what I mean by the order. So if you click on it, you can increase the number. You click on it, and then it sets the order itself, but then you can change it as well. And basically, and I'll just show you an example. So let's say, for example, we wanted cluster number all the way over here. Let's say it appeared like this on the questionnaire. So we actually want it to look like this. If I go again, if I right click it and go to tabs and show tab order, you'll notice here when you're doing the data entry, you want to have date of interview, click tab or enter, and then it will go to, you want it to be household number, then team number and cluster number. But you notice here this is a mistake because now it's going to go from date of interview, it's going to skip household number and team number, and it's going to go right to cluster number. So it's going to go from here, here. So that's incorrect. So this is just a way of making sure, double checking that the software has it in the order that you want. Most times it does a pretty good job, but for the example that I gave in the food consumption, examples like that when there's lots of groups, you typically will have to go in it and then set it yourself. So let's just fix that. Right, cluster number. I'm very cognizant of time here, so I'm going to try and speed up, but we're almost finished anyway. So now we have our 2-page questionnaire. We're just going to pretend it's completed. And if we want to enter data, you'll notice there's a big tab here that says enter data. We'll click on that. So since we haven't entered data before, we want to create a new data table. So we say yes. And this is the starting ID. So this is the number of basically starting the first questionnaire that you enter. So the system, it takes a minute to load. So here we can now enter data. So basically when you're in this function here, you would have your completed questionnaires. So typically, like when we are creating these data forms, your data entry they wouldn't have access. You wouldn't let them access to be able to change the questionnaire form. They would come in each day. They would see this form. It's ready to enter data. But what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to close this one, and I've done already a completed questionnaire that looks like this with all the questions. So I'm just going to show everyone how you get out of this, and then we'll enter the one that I did before, and then we can do a little bit of practice. So for this questionnaire though, so basically I should mention the software, it's really good that anytime that you enter information, it automatically saves it. So for example, when I shut this off, I don't have to worry about losing the form that we created today. It's automatically been saved. The only time that it will ask you, a prompt will come up if you want to save information, is if you're in the middle of, if you haven't had a completed questionnaire. So they call them records. When you filled in a questionnaire, it's called a record. If you're halfway finished a record and you close the software, then it will ask you, do you want this to be saved? Now, most times, if you're halfway done a questionnaire, it's not totally finished, you probably don't want that saved. You want your data entry people to just start that one over when they come back from their break or whatnot. So I'm going to close this. So this here, so it's asking you, so we're on this particular questionnaire. So we didn't finish it, so it's asking me, do you want to save this record? For us, it doesn't matter. So say no. So we're going to click on, there's 2 ways to do this. You can go to create forms or enter data. Since it's the exact same, it's not the exact same, but you can get to the same place where you can enter the data. Today we focused on the create form, so since you can do it through this function as well, let's just go back to this one. So I go to the create forms. I'm going to open a project, and just to repeat what we've done here. So let's open what we did today. So this was our questionnaire that we did today. The data entry webinar, December 19th. We're going to open this, and we want to enter data. So we click enter data, and we're ready to go. So, but now what I'd like to do is go to the one that I created before. I'm going to open project. And so here's a template of one that I already created. So I'm going to enter data. The system just takes a minute to load. You'll notice here it says new record, so it's record 1 of 3. So I've already created 3. I've already done 3 records, and so I'm on record 1. If you want to go to the next one, it'll show you the completed record 2, and then record 3. If you have hundreds of records, so completed questionnaires, it's obviously much easier just to type in the number that you want as opposed to using the arrow icons. Now, let's say that you finished your day, and then you come back the next day and you want to enter more information. Then you go new record, and then you'd fill in all the information. I'm just looking at time here, and then okay, let's finish. Let's fill in one very quickly here. So for December, we said before our range was from the 19th to the 25th. Let's pretend to put in the 13th. It won't let us because we set this range from the 14th to 19th. So for the 21st, 14th. What's the number? I'm just going through this very quickly here. And so the respondent age, 2. We put 3 digits by it. It automatically changes because it has to be 3 digits. Household. That. So with the date of birth for the children, you can set it 6 to 59 months. So look at the dates of the. You don't ever have to do one or the other date.
God, there's another comment.
Okay.
Another question. So
Okay.
It says, would you be able to show us the completed food consumption form for aesthetic purposes? How can you create visible columns and rows?
Okay. So here. Okay. Thank you very much. So basically, I've finished the MUAC. So I'm clicking enter, and it automatically goes to the second page. So the food consumption score. So this would be similar to. I mean, it doesn't have them all here because it's just for time, but they look quite similar. So it's not exactly the same, but it's still pretty similar. If you look at the columns here, so you have, this one isn't even as well. So I could have put food items like we did today, then the numbers. And what you could do, you could stack these so they're a little bit, so they're a little bit more in order. But that's basically how you would do it. In terms of actually putting like the grid lines, to be honest, that maybe there's a function in here. I haven't used it before, but perhaps there is. You could put in grid lines. You'd have to just play around. But I typically I haven't used that function, but the software it might have it. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. We filled in the second questionnaire here, and then we go test 1. When you finish the questionnaire, it automatically loads it and it goes to the new record. So now we have 4 questionnaires that have been entered. So the last thing I want to show everyone is you have all your information here. Basically, you've entered your 4 questionnaires, and let's say you want to do you want to export this into Excel, and then you're going to take it from Excel to use a different statistical software um, for your analysis. So you go to line listing, and then you click on MS Excel. Very simple. So line listing, MS Excel. So here, the system just takes a minute. It generates Microsoft Excel document. You'll notice here, each of these columns is the form name. So here we have like the abbreviated versions that we had. So that's what I was talking before. Each variable is its own column. That form name is what appears here. So here's all the information from the 4 questionnaires that have been entered so far. So that's we're at 9:30 Ottawa time right now. So that's an hour and a half. So that's basically all the information that I was planning to go through for this introductory webinar using Epi Info 7.2. Is there any other questions? Okay, Karen has another question. Please go ahead, Karen. You can either take your audio off and ask me, or you can type it, whatever you prefer.
Hi, Scott. Just want to know if you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you perfect.
So I'm new to Epi Info, but I'm using the software is called Propan, which is complementary to Epi Info, and I would just like to know whether, as nowadays we collect data in tablets using tablet tools. So I just want to know if there's any way that digital questionnaires can be collected using an iPad, given that I can create my questionnaires using Epi Info. Epi Info.
Yeah, so to answer your question, so as I said at the very beginning, the Epi Info software, it can be used. There's 3 different platforms. Today we basically focus just in Windows, but one of the platforms it can be used for is mobile. So these forms that we're creating, it can be used for mobile data collection.
Okay.
It can be used, but to be honest, I'm not an expert in that area. But to answer your question, yes, it is possible. But what I would recommend to you is go to the CDC website that was at the beginning of the
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentation,
Yeah.
and there would be a lot more information there. Just click on the mobile option, and it would have more information. But to answer your question, yes, it says that you can, similar to ODK, you can create these forms, and then the common part from all of them is that they basically export their information Excel, create your forms, and then it can be used from, I think even from Excel, you can upload it in the Excel format, and then it can be used as forms as well. I believe that's what you guys are doing already. But this software, like I said, I'm not an expert in this area, but it did say on the CDC website that you could create these forms and use them for mobile data collection as well.
Okay. Okay. May I know which kind of mobile is it most compatible with?
I'm not, once again, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm guessing it'd probably be Android.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That will be all for now. Thank you very much. I thought your presentation was very much well delivered.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, for anyone else, is there any other questions? Okay, just to finish off for everyone. So I just want to show you very briefly. There's there's a guideline which I didn't send out already because it's quite a large file, and I was worried that people might not be able to receive it in some countries. But all the information that I spoke about today is this in this. It's a relatively old quick start guide. So on the Epi Info website, there is manuals in which I encourage you, once you get into like the intermediate and advanced stages, it has every function that you could think of, but I believe the manual is a few hundred pages. But this document here, it's only 78 pages, but it's quite large. But it has everything that I spoke about today as well. It even goes into basic analyzing your data and other things as well. And so what I'm going to do when I'm finished the webinar, there's a third one tomorrow. I'll send this document as just a single document to everyone. In addition, as I mentioned in the introduction, eventually, like I said, towards the end of 2017 or early 2018, we will have the TechRT will have this one of the three webinars, exact same information I'm presenting for all three. We will have one of them available on YouTube. So I will send the link to everyone at that time as soon as it's available. So once again, if there's no other questions, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to take part in this webinar, and for everyone to have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.